Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. Today's episode features Lockie Phillips, who is a horse trainer, a personal coach, a clinician, and a hoof care provider. The reason why I've asked Lockie on to this podcast is actually there's two reasons. The first reason is my love for working with and playing with horses has been reignited in the last 2 years. And I've been very intentional about calling in teachers and trainers who are able to look at the relational dynamics between humans and horses and to approach them with kindness, with compassion, with boundaries, with consent. And as I've been deepening into this work with horses, I've been noticing how it's actually been shifting and transforming a lot of the things that I see in human relationships. And so it's something that I really have had profound aha moments, because sometimes it's hard to see the entanglements in our human relationships because it's so close to us. When you put that relational dynamic and look at it as a pure energy in a body that looks so different from yours, there's something about that that really shifts that dynamic. And for me, it's been really empowering to take those lessons that I've been learning from horses and put them into practice in my personal relationships and in my business relationships. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because I've been following Lockie for a while now on Instagram and on Facebook. He has impeccable boundaries, meaning he has boundaries that are clear and they're compassionate when it comes to how he holds his community in a sacred, safe place, but also how he holds them accountable. So because of that, I really wanted to pick his brain around the concepts of boundaries and also agency. And so this conversation is going to be really helpful for you if you are a spiritual entrepreneur and you're feeling a little bit unsure of how client agency and autonomy can actually coexist with holding healthy boundaries for yourself within your business. A little bit more about Lockie is that he was born in Australia, so you can hear that accent in the interview, and he now lives in Spain. And his ethos, his philosophy around supporting human and horse relationships is about helping deeply caring horse people create emotionally balanced horses using science and empathy and feel. He works online and also in person with international clientele, and emotional well-being for both humans and horses is the primary focus of Lockie's work. And I think that you will be able to touch into that in our conversation here. And so I'm so excited to share this conversation with Lockie. And as always, I love when y'all tell me what's landing for you. What did you take away from this conversation? What are some of the aha moments that got ignited for you? I'd love to hear that. You can always DM me on Instagram or send me an email, kat@empoweredcuriosity.com. And I listen and read every single comment that you share with me. And quite honestly, it is what helps shape the future of this episode. So if you want to hear more specific things, if you are wanting to hear from particular guests, I'm totally open to hear about all of it. So here is the conversation with Lockie. Welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast, Lockie. I was just sharing right before we hit record that I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I feel like I'm pretty public about my work with horses, and it's been just a very short journey up until this point. And I've been taking a lot of the lessons of working consensually and ethically with horses and then applying them to business. And I've been following your work for quite a bit of time now and have just loved your take on relationships, I think is kind of the overarching theme of where I want to take this conversation, relationships, whether it is with horses or with humans, and in particular, I've seen you upholding really beautiful boundaries with your community and really applying these concepts of consent and boundaries that I have a suspicion comes from your work with horses. But being able to see them in real time and how you work with your community has been just such a learning for me. So I guess even before we start the conversation, thank you. Thank you for the lessons that you've shared even thus far.
Thank you so much, Kat. Really happy to be here. I'm always amazed anyone wants to talk to me at all. So every time I'm on a podcast, I still remember doing my first podcast interview, and I was so nervous, and I still can get nervous, but every time someone invites me to their table to talk, I'm happy to talk. What I don't like doing is becoming too self-indulgent about my history and my storyline, because
Yeah.
I think I'm actually kind of boring. I try to keep it about what I'm here to do, which is to be in service to people and to horses. That's really
Mm-hmm.
where I sit. I'm here to be of service to others.
Yeah.
If I wanted to navel gaze and think about my own storyline, I'd go for a trail ride with my horse and think about it. I don't need to do that publicly, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm always happy to speak to intelligent people.
That's
And this is probably the first podcast I've done where someone had specific questions about running a business. So this is a first
Yeah. And I
for
actually
me
don't
to
have
have that
specific
conversation.
questions. Most of my interviews are pretty free flowing. And
That's
I was
great.
thinking about it this morning and I was like, he's probably never done an interview quite like this because people probably want to
Great
know more about the horse side of
business side.
things rather than the business side of things. And I don't know, I can't help but see how difficult it is to run a community like yours because in the horse world there's so many different ways that you can approach horsemanship
Mm,
and and I think the horse community is not shy about telling you when they think that you're wrong or that you could be doing things differently. And so I'm curious about first just how that process has been in terms of being able to find your own way of relating to horses and maybe giving people a bit of a background of maybe how different you are to other horse quote unquote trainers, I guess.
mm. So most people on podcasts end up talking to me about not horses, not business. They end up talking to me about the career I don't do anymore, which was as a professional dancer, which I'm trying to steer the conversation away from that because I haven't danced for a long time.
Yeah.
I was a professional dancer and this was my life for a long time. And it was a big part of my life. But I've also been around horses for 10 years. When I got back into horses as an adult, I was around them as a child. And then when I got back into them as an adult, I wanted to do it just as a hobby. And I went to a local riding school. I was living in Poland at the time. I'm Australian, but I was living in Poland at the moment. I live in Spain now, but that's another conversation. Um, and I went to a local riding school and I took some lessons, and it was just very mechanical. I would ask a question like, why is the horse doing that thing? And they wouldn't tell me why the horse was doing that. They would say what to do mechanically to stop the horse from doing it. I'm like, that's not my question. So that was my first major question that I had, that nobody else seemed to have the question of why is the horse doing X, Y, Z? They just were thinking about how do I get what I want from the horse? And I thought, no, I don't want to be this way, because as a dancer, I knew what it was like to suffer from body extractivism. So have
Yeah.
someone use and colonialize your body for their own financial gain. I knew what that was like, or their
Yeah.
personal gain. And so I was like, no, 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 I don't want to do that to a horse. I want to actually have someone who can teach me how to ride and teach me how to be with horses but do it from that place of asking the question, why is the horse doing X, Y, Z?
Mm-hmm.
So then this was 10 years ago. So I started searching like horse thinking, and then horse thinking led to horse psychology, and horse psychology led to natural horsemanship came up on Google. And at the time, that was the buzzword, right? I don't do natural horsemanship anymore, but that was a stepping stone for me. And so I looked for teachers in my area who could teach that. I got really, really lucky. They technically weren't my area. They were quite remote from where I was living, but I managed to go to them, and I spent every weekend there for a number of years and then some. And they trained me up and took me through their certification program as an instructor and a trainer, and they took me under their wing. They became like a family to me. They really, really mentored me. And I paid, I think, for the first 3 lessons. And after that, they just didn't want money from me. They literally just apprenticed me for all
Mm-hmm.
those years with their horses. And I'm so, so grateful for them. And I love them very much for that. And you know what horses are like? As soon as you dip your toe in the water, it's an immediate snowball effect. And so it just kind of went on from there. So I would say from the beginning, I made a conscious choice not to follow the status quo,
Mm.
because was a classically trained ballet dancer, tall, thin, long legs. The easiest and most boring thing in the world that I could have done was go and buy myself a shiny matchy set to lovely dressage saddle and gone to the local dressage academy and bounced around in dressage. That would have been the most logical progression. And in fact, that's what everyone expected me to do.
Sure.
But from the beginning, there was something, at least in the environments I had access to, that just felt very, very problematic there.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want that
Mm-hmm.
from the start.
I want to circle back to this thought of how do I get something out of this animal?
Mm.
And I feel like this is one of the ways in which I'm kind of the thought that like capitalism isn't this like bad, evil thing, but I think of it more as like there are incredibly toxic elements within capitalism. And this question of how do I get something out of this, whether it is an animal that you're working with or a potential client that you might want to sign up to do lessons with you or be in a program with you. And to me, I feel like this is like the crux of this question
Mm.
of divergence, of being able to move away from the toxic elements of capitalism and move towards the term that I use in my community is regenerative. And
Mm.
so can we start to create these dynamics within relationships first that aren't extractive and aren't about, can I get this other soul to do something that might feel uncomfortable for them or is actually not in alignment for them. And then I think that relationship is kind of that like microcosm that's able to like ripple out culturally. And so
100%.
yeah, I'm curious of this concept of how do I get an animal to do something, and then how that has, it might even not have been a shift for you. It's probably just an inherent part of how you relate to humans now. And maybe break down a little bit of allowing people the sovereignty to say yes or no instead of like pushing them into like a dynamic where they feel like they have to say yes to this thing.
So, toxic capitalism, there's also toxic socialism. There's toxic democracy, and there's toxic totalitarianism, and there's always a shadow and a light to these things. That's the yin and the yang and the balance. There's always positives and negatives to it. And where we go wrong is looking at the negative of something and conflating that as the totality of something, and it's really not.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where toxic capitalism starts. Okay. I want everyone to close their eyes and go back in their memories, go back in their early childhood. You're in the supermarket with your overworked, underpaid, stressed out mother or similar. You're in the supermarket, you're at the checkout, you're bored, you've got low blood sugar, you're tired, and you see those lovely chocolate candy bars or sweets at the checkout. You point to it and you say, Mum, can I have a candy bar? And she says, not now, honey. And you, 3, 4, however years old, have a complete meltdown, a tantrum, and start screaming and crying there in the supermarket. Maybe you did that, maybe you didn't. But I think most children go through that period of melting down when the world didn't meet what they wanted, didn't give them what they wanted. And this basically separates children from adults. The whole process of going from childhood to becoming an adult is hopefully, it's a crapshoot, but hopefully maturing this process of sometimes we don't get what we want, how we want it, when we want it. Fast forward into an equestrian environment. This is the level of thoughtfulness a lot of people give into their horsemanship. How do I get what I want?
Yeah.
Period. That's basically how a lot of horsemanship shows up, and it wears many guises. It can even wear the hat of positive reinforcement. It can even wear the hat of somatic practices and trauma-informed practices. It can wear any kind of disguise, but the principle underneath it is essentially, how do I get what I want? Then some people have clued on to the fact that, hang on a minute, this might not be the most evolved way to engender a relationship, a working partnership with this animal, might not be ethical, maybe we could do better. So they put a bit of effort in, they put a bit of thought, they become more thoughtful, and they go from, how do I get what I want, into, what is the best way for me to get what I want? And I go, yeah, okay, that's a good start. Then they go, okay, and then they try again. They say, okay, all right. What is the best and kindest, most ethical way for me to get what I want? ... and meet the horse's needs. I say, good, we're good. We're on the right track, but we've still got some work to do. And they go, okay, great. They go, oh, this is really heavy. This is intense. It's like, yeah, this is thoughtfulness. Maybe you've just not been thoughtful before. And if you've never lifted up a heavy load before with your brain, the first time you do it, it feels heavy. But the more you do it, it just gets easier. It's like a muscle we've got to work out. Empathy is a muscle you have to work out to have it strong, to have it conditioned, to have it useful and functional. And so they think, and then it becomes, how does the horse get what they want, and how do I get what I want? And how we both get what we need. This is a really good place to be. And then from that, you can say, what does the horse want? So when you're serving a client, my thought is, what do they want? What do they want? And what do I want? And how can we both get what we need today? Because if you can get all of that, then what that does is puts everybody in a winning situation. And once everybody's winning, then all of these other things are released to the relationship, such as joy, such as humor, such as creativity, such as abundance, such as. But you don't get those things until you've done that foundational work first. And what we often get is people wanting the results without the process. How do I get what I want? I want the results, but I'm not going through a process to get there. I just want to have it.
Yeah.
And I think that's intellectually and emotionally lazy, frankly. And maybe I'm putting people on blast for it, but I really try to lead by example and not just sit here and talk about it, but actually show that being thoughtful, once you're good at it, and being careful with your horse makes everything easier for everybody.
Yeah. And to me, what I'm hearing in all this is this sense of reciprocity. you know, the sense of both creatures, both souls, being able to get what they want and need out of this
Mm,
relationship.
mm,
And it's sort of that like that yin and yang. I'm glad that you already have a better context for what that verbiage means, but it's like we can fall into a place as, you know, working with horses or working with clients where we flow a little bit more into service. And then that's a bit of an immature yin expression where you're giving too much. And then you end up
mm,
feeling
mm,
that like lack of reciprocity and fall into
mm, mm,
resentment. And then on the flip side is the, you know, oversaturated yang energy, which is I'm going to put a lot of structure, get really dogmatic, get the things that I need out of it. And then that's how we get into extractive relationships. And so, what I'm
mhm,
hearing in this conversation is this beautiful interplay of reciprocity where both people are able to state really clearly what your needs are, what the other
mm,
person's needs are, and do your best to come into alignment. And
mm,
sometimes that alignment is a no. And I think that that's what we have to sort of accept as business owners is
mhm,
that alignment is giving sovereignty back to your clients. In your work, you're giving sovereignty back to your horses, right? And and in that sort of interplay, it's this question of how do we both get our needs met in a way that builds trust. You know, like you went through
mm.
that like that list of things that, you know, comes out of this kind of relationship. And to me, the biggest one there is trust.
Mm. Trust of yourself
Mm,
first so that you can extend that to others. Thank you so much for uh, opening this conversation and this subject matter for me with me today because it's something I've been thinking about. It's something I spent a lot of time being present with, but I don't tend to really talk about it on my platforms to my community because I think it's kind of tacky and gauche on a social media platform to talk about the nuts and bolts of your business structure. I'd rather just have the structure there, and if people want to engage with the business, then the structure's there to receive them. But I've never really sat down and talked publicly about the structure of business and the way I see a relationship between a client and a service provider. I've just been kind of busy doing it rather than talking about it.
yeah.
But at the same time, how you do it has a lot to do with whether you're able to be successful or not. Now, I've had plenty of client relationships as a service provider, which were incredibly toxic and negative for me and for them. I've had them and I learned from them. I'm like, why is this not working? Why is this not working? And it caused a lot of introspection in me. And then I figured out I had some room for growth. And then when I realized I also needed to learn some things about running a business, then I reached out to people who knew how to teach me that. There's a wonderful a company called Redmare Enterprises in the States who specialize in business coaching for equestrian professionals. And so they've
Mm,
really, really helped me sort of hash out a lot of the nuts and bolts. Also, I'm an apple and my parents are the tree, and I didn't fall very far from them. So my dad back home in Australia, he's self-employed. He's a lobbyist, and he specializes in contracting, employment, industrial relations, and legislation around tax, legislation around small businesses. This is what he specializes in.
mm,
So I grew up in a house learning from him, and my mum has a degree in marketing, and she ran a successful business in Australia in the 90s and noughties, and she sold that. And she started that with nothing and grew it into this big business. And so both my parents are entrepreneurs, both of them are self-employed, and I have leaned on them heavily, like to say,
mm,
how do I do this? How, like, I know you guys
mhm.
don't know anything about horses, but how do I structure this business? How do I relate to people? And there's a few things I've learned along the way. Um, Maybe we could dive into that a little bit more specifically. What would you like to discuss about that more specifically?
What I see so much of in business nowadays, and what I'm trying to help people unlearn, is action for action's sake. And so the way that I talk about it, because my background is in Taoist medicine, is we talked a bit about the like unbalanced yin and the unbalanced yang,
Mm,
but when it comes to what I see out there, which is a lot of, if we take marketing for example as just the thing to play with, there's a lot of marketing that is, oh, you just have to post on social media every single day, or you have to, find a pain point and then pound on that pain point until somebody feels like they need to take action. And my thinking, and I'm kind of curious about like your take on this, is when we get back into our intentions, which is actually a balanced expression of yin.
mm,
If we get back into our intentions and get into our core values, which is where I've learned so much from horses. Like one of my core values is consent. One of my core values is having, strong boundaries. One of my core values is, you know, making sure that at every level of interacting with a potential client, it comes from a sense of giving the power back to them versus taking their power away from them.
Oh, okay. Spidey senses just went off 100%. Am I allowed to stop you there?
Yes, yes, go, 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 go,
Okay,
go.
okay, okay. Yes, 1,000%. Something I posted about recently because it was coming up in my business was agency. I say every week in an email, in a coaching call, in a live lesson, on social media to a comment or something, I say something like, your agency is important to me. So I will not make this decision for you. I will be here in support and help you brainstorm what the options are. I will help you learn tools that you can use for your decision-making process. But vulnerable horse people looking for a messiah are usually going to find one, and I refuse to be it. I went to
Yes.
Catholic high school, okay? Catholic high school. I am cult proof. Like, I have, uh, my mum says I've got a bullshit radar, but it's like when I see that cult like encouragement from a service provider and they've got all their clients dancing on strings underneath them, I just find that really, really irresponsible, really, really not what I want to do. I want to work with people so that they can be the best realized version of themselves so that they can do that for their horse. I don't want them to be reformed in my image. I don't want them to try to be like me. I don't want them to say, oh, Lockie, would you make the decision? Because again, if we go back, the 3-year-old in the supermarket says, oh, mum, you take care of it. You do the decisions. You cook the dinner. You feed me the food. No, grow up. We're adults. We are in charge of our own decision making. And maybe that sucks, but it only sucks if you're not very good at it yet. And most of us aren't. And it's a lifelong journey to get good at that. So there's that, the personal agency. I love to see people with their agency. And it became abundantly clear to me recently, since sort of the last 12 months, my business really kind of grew exponentially. For a long time, it's just been a slow burn. And the last 12 months, it just kind of went kaboom. And since everything went kaboom, it's like, oh my God, how easy it would be for me as a service provider, because people are presenting their agency to you on a silver platter every day. And
Yes.
all I have to do is reach out, take it from them and say, give me your money and spend it here, 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 and here. That's all I would have to do. And I refuse to do it that way. I've also been myself a client in a horse training community that I identified later was actually more like a cult. And I realized it was a cult when this trainer released a brand new online course. The online course they were releasing was a rehashing of samples of their other online courses. So it wasn't new material. It was just a collection of material they already had. And they did it at the beginning of the pandemic as an instant kind of business response to sudden loss of income. They wanted to generate something. And they made this new mini course like in one weekend just by pulling together videos they already had. And they were selling it for somewhere in the region of 890 euros for this course.
Wow.
Which is confident pricing. I mean, you do you, go for it, fine. If that's what you're worth, that's what you're worth. But someone else in this training community reached out to me and said, I really want to buy this trainer's new course, but I really can't afford it because, the pandemic's hit. I've lost my job. I have no savings. I can't afford it. How can I reach out to this trainer and apologize to them for not buying their new course? And I said,
Whoa.
okay, everyone pump the brakes. You don't have to apologize to this person because you don't have the money to buy their new course. And if you feel like you do, they've taken your agency and sold you down the river weeks, days, months, years ago. You are wake up. So I realized how easy it is for a service provider to fall into that trap. And I really don't want to do that because it just feels irresponsible to me.
Yeah.
And I'm imperfect human being trying to figure this out just like everybody else. I'm no God and I'm no guru. I'm just another horse trainer, another horse owner who cares very much about what they do. And I'm trying to help people and help horses. It's really that simple. Those are my intentions.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of business intentions, I have no interest in being famous. I have no interest in being crazy wealthy. I want to live a comfortable, secure life. That's all I want for myself and for my family. Comfortable and secure life. Unfortunately, in order to do that, I have to have a public presence. Because can I tell you, if I won the lottery tomorrow, you could not find me. I would be gone. Like I would disappear, because I actually don't like having a public presence. It's not something that I do. I do it consentingly in the sense that I feel people when I do it with them, but it's not something I walk into kind of loving that whole being in public kind of thing. I'm not a showman in that sense. I don't like it. So there's that. And then the reciprocity with someone. There has to be a fair trade between services rendered, products given, and financial remuneration. There has to be a fair trade. I live in a local community of what I can identify as toxic socialism, and they believe that any kind of profit for services rendered is somehow kind of evil capitalism. And it's like, meanwhile, everybody's destitute with their hands out on the street corner. I mean, it really is that way where I'm living. And no, I have to sit and calculate how much does it cost me to keep the dog and pony show going? How much does it cost me? And then how much money did I put into my own education and development? And then I come up with an hourly rate, and then I include government fees, then I include a 20-year projection, then I include taxes, then I include incidentals, then I include equipment, etc., and there's my hourly rate. And if you can't afford it, well, I do have free options available. I do have a Patreon where you can see me for $4.50 a month, but no one is entitled to have access to me, my services, or my intellectual property for nothing. Nobody is entitled to that. And I love that you mentioned, like, say what you need. There's a wonderful author and American television personality who's rather eccentric, but I have like a guilty, not guilty pleasure in her. Her name's Iyanla Van Zandt. Have you heard of her?
No.
She had like a television show with Oprah, etc. And I was watching her because I have a penchant for like bad reality TV, and she had this reality TV program for a while where she like goes in and helps people with their lives. And one of the things she says all the time is, "You matter. Ask for what you want, and be prepared to get a no, but ask for what you want. Speak the truth, and be kind and be respectful." It's really that easy.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I feel like every business owner needs to have those words like tattooed across their forehead because, any one of those can go a bit awry. And I wanted to circle back to what goes into your pricing because it was actually a Facebook post that you made and somebody was complaining about your pricing that like prompted me to reach out to you for this interview
Oh, wow. Okay.
because I loved the way that you were so unapologetic about having your needs met. And I think that that's especially for service providers who are in some form of a healing practice. Like that's a bit of a rare thing. I don't know if you know that, Lucky, but I've coached so many folks who are in this space and they grapple with that question of, am I allowed to ask for my needs to be met? And I can't remember exactly how you had phrased it, but it was in reference to some in-person clinics that you were hosting, and and your response was just very firm and kind. You know, I think that's the
You can
thing
be
that people.
both.
Yeah, exactly. You can be both
You
firm
can be
and
both.
kind. Yeah.
This is one element that we can work on, all of us, including myself. I wish I was better at it, is the whole thing of two things can be true at the same
Yeah.
time. You don't
Both
have to have
and.
one or the other. You're allowed to be kind and firm. In fact, sometimes firmness is a form of kindness because it leaves no confusion on the table to allow someone to misinterpret or to allow somebody else to be left in
Yeah.
chaos by you.
Yeah.
I will not allow someone else to be left in chaos by me. I don't appreciate it when it's done to me from others, and I would never want that on someone else. I think I remember vaguely the comment you're talking about, and my clinic tickets are not cheap. They are a serious price point. For some people, that's pocket change for them. And for some people, they would literally need to get on a payment plan for 6 months to come to the clinic. I get it. I get it. But that is what it costs me to provide the service.
Yeah.
Just to get the immigration sorted to come to the States to teach, you're looking at $3,000 just to get that sorted. So before I've even gotten on a plane, it's $3,000 in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then I've got not just my flights to get there, but I've got to eat and I've got to drink and I've got to drive and put fuel in those cars and have insurance. And then back at home, when I'm not at home, I'm not at home and I'm the main provider for my family. And when I'm at home, I have proven over the number of years that per month I'm earning a basic minimum with my online work, and that's my daily fee. So I can't go and travel for clinics if I'm going to be getting less than what I would be getting at home, because that would be professional suicide. If I was running a charity, or I had corporate sponsors, sure, then I can augment the fees. But I don't, because I'm not a charity. Charities get assistance from governments that I don't get because I pay all of my taxes and I do it on my own. I had someone this morning in Germany, a fan of mine who's also a client, ask, they want to do a clinic in their area in Germany. And they said, oh, if we meet the minimum number of participants that you have said you have to have in order to come for the clinic, could the next ticket after the minimum number of participants be discounted? And I said, respectfully, no. If you wanted to find me a charity who could sponsor that ticket, or a corporate sponsor who could sponsor someone to join the clinic, 1000% let's do it. But this is my business and I am allowed to be successful in it. I worked for 10 years in a high performance career earning less than 10,000 American dollars a year. A year.
Wow.
I am committed to pulling myself and my family out of a poverty cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I will have to work twice as hard as everybody else just to reach middle class, just middle class. I don't owe anybody charitable services. I don't owe anybody anything. This is my prices because that's what I've calculated it costs me to deliver the service to you, period.
Mm-hmm.
If that's not affordable for you, then let's work together online. You can see my Patreon for €4.50 a month. Now I have a YouTube where it's free.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not free because there are advertisers who pay YouTube to have my videos there. So someone's paying for that video that you're watching for free. But in this age of constant availability of information for free online, people have started to feel entitled to have access to you for nothing. And that is so not the case for small business owners because we don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
We don't have that luxury. Now, I've grappled with the guilt of it in the past as well. And last year when I ran clinics, I was offering discounts for people who were in a minority. So people of color, the queer community, single mothers, differently abled people, disabled people, anyone who was in a disadvantaged community, I was offering heavy discounts on the tickets where I was basically offering it at cost. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm a new face in the industry and I've got to work pretty hard to sell out a clinic called Emotional Horsemanship. It's pretty difficult to do. So I did that and it was mostly fine. The people who bought those tickets generally were fabulous people and I'm so glad that they were there. But there were a few logistical issues in the business side of things at the clinic tour last September with some of the participants and the ticket holders. And the only people who caused me problems in my business were those people who got the special dispensation tickets. They were the only people. They showed up to the clinic with some kind of entitlement because of their discount. And I went, hang on a minute. So now I don't offer those discounts anymore because it was abused, right?
Yeah.
So you got to have a strong no in this world.
Yeah.
Got to have a strong no.
I have two thoughts. The first is if we go back to what goes into the cost of working with you or really with any service provider, I think the thing that got left off of your list that I would like to add into that list is the transformation that somebody is going to have in working with you. And so for me, I come from, I was an acupuncturist in my past career, and in that industry, you charge by the hour. And to me, that's another aspect of the toxicity of capitalism, where your value, your worth is based on the hour of labor that you put into something, because it doesn't take into account, like you were saying, the education that you've invested in yourself. I would say even beyond that, that's even more valuable is the embodiment of that education. It's not just like, oh, I took this class and so therefore I need to recoup my financial expenses. There's time and energy that gets put into what it is that we each do. And so that is what people are paying for is, I've struggled actually, I shouldn't say I've struggled, but I've had small businesses. I've been running small businesses since 2007. And I feel like I've gotten to a point in my work now where, my business is really fulfilling. It feels like I'm putting my passions out into the world. It feels like there's some momentum. You know, I'm able to support myself and my small team. And then, but that took me, I don't know, over a decade to get to this place. And so part of the transformation of working with me in my work is you don't have to take over a decade to build up your small business to a point where it is going to be sustainable. And I think that for me, when I look at your content, it's like there's not really very many people out there. I have a close friend, I think you know her, Shannon Bean, Humming Horse.
Mm,
And so
love her.
she's like the
Love
only other
Shannon.
person who like gets this, and like
Hmm.
we can nerd out about, you know, the psychology of horses for hours on end. And 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 so that's what I receive as somebody who would be a consumer of your product, is the fact that there's really nobody else talking about how you do things. And for that uniqueness in being able to ask these questions of why is that horse doing that? You know, I'm willing to pay a premium for that because it's so different. And so being
You're
able
absolutely
to,
right.
yeah. And so being able to like fold in, yes, like we've established that you have needs, you need to pay your bills, you need to keep your, you know, dog and pony show running, but also it's meeting the needs of the people who sign up to work with you, in that
Mm,
they get to have, I don't know, like I want to say like it crunches down that timeline a bit, so that they don't
mm.
have to be in the weeds for a decade before they get to the level of where you are with horses. Like you can sort of give them a shortcut, right?
Right.
Of even just asking, even having a place to ask those questions feels like a shortcut, you
Mm.
know? So
I
there's,
run the business today that I wish I had access to 10 years ago.
yes, that's how I feel too.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
Genuinely. The courses I've made, I'm like, holy cow, why didn't I have this course 10 years ago when I needed it? Like,
Yes.
so
Yes, yes,
I've gone
yes.
ahead and made it because it wasn't out there, the course that I like, you
Yeah.
know, and I really looked. I really, really looked. I, this subject you just mentioned is a subject I'm a little bit too close to the tree, can't see the forest on, because um, I'm so balls deep in delivering services every day and doing my best in that, that I can't step back and realize, oh, by the way, I give a lot of value to my clients. I don't even talk about that because for me, it's just like I'm swimming in that all the time, that I give value to my clients. Like a fish, does a fish know that they're in water? It's sort of like, I know that I give value to my clients, so I don't speak about it because I'm just doing that all the time. At least I think so. But at the same time, I don't promise any transformation because that might encourage laziness in the client, that they show up and think Lockie will spoon feed them the transformation, and it's a two-way street. My mum, marketing genius, business genius, things she told me which I live by. So my mum said to me right at the beginning, she said, Lockie, if you believe in what you're doing and you're doing it honestly and you're doing it well, you don't need to market anything to anyone because it will sell itself. That's number
Yes.
one. I don't like predatory marketing. For example, every time I see a Facebook post that says, read to the end, see my free gift for you, free in capital letters, then insert your pain point here speaking to ideal clients. Did you know that when you do X, it is wrong because of Y? It's sort of like, it's so
It's a formula.
blatantly
Yeah.
predatorial marketing. And the people I like to work with are actually super intelligent people. I need to work with intelligent people, and they see straight through it. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
horse boy, like try better than that. So I just try to be as honest and authentic as possible. I don't know anything about a social media algorithm. Nothing. I regularly write social media posts that lose me followers, and I see that as filtration.
Yeah,
Let us
absolutely.
filter everything out, make sure I've got the right people there.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe in predatorial marketing, but in terms of delivering a service, you've always got to do your best. And I don't promise any transformation because both sides have to perform. That's what my mum taught me. She said, Lockie, in a business relationship, client, service provider, it is a two-way street. Both sides have to perform. For example, if you're walking down High Street, you walk into a shop. You actually have to walk into the shop and pick up the thing and take it to the cash register in order to buy it. That is your duty and performance. Your duty is also to try the thing on so that you like the thing you're buying. That is your performance. The business's job is to provide the service, make it easy for you, and to assist you if you ask for help. So both sides have to perform. I do discovery calls, right, which are free half-an-hour things. Discovery calls is free access to my time. I get the most no-shows on discovery calls. When people have paid good money, they always show up and they're always ready. They've got their list and they're ready to go. Yeah. I had a no-show today on a discovery call, and I wrote to that client and I said, hello, we had a booking. I really hope you're okay and that no emergency took you away from the booking. They also get 24-hour reminders on email and on text. I really hope everything's okay. I was really looking forward to meeting you. I would love to help you, but if you want to get a second appointment with me, you're going to have to pay for the second appointment because I've already waited for you and you didn't show up, you know? And so I had to reduce my availability for these free calls for everybody because the service was being exploited. And so both sides have to perform. And when you start looking at your calendar and you're booked up and you're busy and there's a 3-month waiting list, that's when it's time to put your prices up.
Yeah. I'm going to push back on that transformation piece a little bit, if you're open to it. Because, because again, it's that concept of that we were talking about before of by you holding the space and asking the client to look within, that is the spark of transformation that happens. I completely agree with you in terms of, being able to like you can't care more about the client than the client cares about whatever it is that they're picking up, right? And so we don't want to create these messy boundaries where, you're sort of promising a transformation, thinking that like, oh, Lockie's going to just deliver this thing and I can just sit back and just receive the thing. But I think that the way in which I've seen you write and I've seen you run your courses, that transformation is an internal one that you are catalyzing. You can't deny the fact that you're catalyzing that transformation.
No,
I
can't.
Yeah. And so that's how I feel about my work too, is, I'm not going to spoon feed people a business. What we do in my work is we actually look at the challenges and the blocks, and this question that you asked at the very, very beginning is, why is the horse doing that? I ask that of people, is like, why are you doing that?
Why is the business doing that to you? Why are you a victim of your own business?
Exactly.
And how do you change it?
Yeah. And a lot of times we go back into talking about people's trauma and their nervous systems and why they feel safe or unsafe to make certain decisions. And so it's a really internal process. It's not just a, like, let me just give you the strategies and then the, like, God, I love that example that you gave of just the template that everyone has in terms of a social media post. And so I think that it's fair to say that you are, whether you realize it or not, like when I put my marketing hat on and I look at your social media posts, like what you're outlining is the point B of where people can be in relationship to their horses. And so you're already talking about that transformation, even if it's just in your own experience of your own relationship with Samson, And so like, it's so in my mind, I feel like it is fair, and it would actually be a form of bypassing for you to not talk about the fact that working with you, working with me, working with any service provider who's listening to this right now, of course there's a transformation, right?
Hmm.
And you
Hmm.
are allowed to be the catalyst for that, not the owner of the transformation, if that makes sense.
Hmm. No, I really appreciate that pushback. I love getting pushed back on, right? I really enjoy it because I think
Me too.
that's where we challenge each other. Like
Yeah.
I was a champion debater in high school, and I haven't lost many debates, but that's what I thrive on is that gentle, collegiate, cooperative pushback with each other that's non-hostile actually helps us to re-examine ourselves. And you just gave that to me, so thank you for that. But I, I think I don't talk about the transformations that I afford people or catalyze for people. I actually don't talk about that. And I often end up talking about my own storyline with my own horses
Yeah.
rather than experiences that I've had with client horses or with other horses because I consider that storyline subject to privacy. I can talk about my horses all I want,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I talking about other people's horses is sort of like violating a boundary for them that I kind of see it like a when a client comes to me, that's their privacy.
Yeah.
So very, very seldom will I post about a client transformation because that's their private journey. If
Fair.
they like it, often they leave a review, and those reviews are easy to find somewhere. I've got 100 on my Instagram. There are hundreds on Udemy. There are dozens on my social media. If you wanted to find a review and read a client experience about me and what I do for people, that is easy to find for those who are looking for it.
Yeah.
I guess, and I might be hazarding a guess here, I'm chewing on this one live with you. So why don't I discuss the transformations for others more? Because part of me feels slimy talking about other people's success and insinuating that it could be your success too, only if you came and worked with me. That feels a little bit slimy, a little bit gauche, a little bit tacky to talk
Agreed.
about myself in that way. And
Agreed.
I'd rather let my work speak for itself, and I'd rather let my clients speak about my services themselves. And you can go and find them, and I made them abundantly clear. I don't need to like reinforce that. And also, when I do talk about my experience, I always try to make sure I'm not talking about myself. I try to frame it so that it is relatable to someone else's experience. I'll say, I was doing this, but that might for you feel like when you do XYZ. I try to get people thinking about themselves when they read about what I write about, and what I write about is what I do. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I am on that one.
Yeah, and I agree with you in that, like, it is kind of tacky to be like, this is what Susan was able to do with her horse, and if you work with me, then, you're going to be able to do that as well. But I think that when I read your content, because, so as sort of a beginner of like working with horses, I look at your relationship to your horses and I think, oh, that's where I would like to be someday,
Mm,
right? And then you have a really beautiful way of breaking down the steps
mm,
and the like processes and the internal journey that you've taken to get to that place. And so I think you're
mm-hmm,
already talking about those transformations. And
mm,
it just happens to be your story, which you feel like you have ownership over versus someone else's story, right?
mm,
And I'm a different business owner. I feel okay with sharing my client stories with my audience and my community, if only to help them see that they're not alone, right?
mm,
And like that sense of, because there's so many people out there. I mean, you felt this too when you first started working with horses. It's like I feel so alone in this. I can't be the only person who's asking, why is that horse doing that thing? And
mm. I don't like people very much. So, well, that's wrong. I do like people, but generally speaking, a lot of people really, really suck and have, I think, bad relationships, interpersonal relationships are more common than good ones, whether that's friendships, the professional relationships, romantic. Bad ones are more common than good ones. And I have a very, very low tolerance for crappy interpersonal relationships. So as far as being around horses and being the only one of me around me, I was really comfortable in that position. Like I was really okay with that. I'm comfortable to be a loner and to be on my own. That's really, I like my own company. I enjoy my own company and I always have. And I'm also a little bit of a contrarian. Like if everyone's going left, I'm going to go right because I just feel bored going with everybody else. So that's kind of how I am by nature,
Sure.
slightly. I'm an Aries, right? I go horns first. I'm kind of a bit contrarian anyway. So that's just me. But I do hear you when you say that a lot of people feel really alone. That's the storyline I get with my clients all the time. But I'm also really clear in who I'm serving, and I'm not serving everybody, and I'm not trying to be everything for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm really clear that I'm trying to serve the most underserved community in the horsemanship community, the one that is the most looked down upon and patronized upon by the trainer community, and that is the recreational horse ownership and horse riding market, which is also happening to be the fastest growing sector of the equestrian community. So I have no idea why horse trainers and riding instructors are so patronizing and condescending towards their recreational riders because give it 5 years, 10 years, they're going to be paying your bills. So you need to be paying them some mind. And here we have horse owners who are in a very unique situation with their horse. And they've got access to professionals who have professional tools designed to teach an entirely different category of horse person. For example, horsemanship training techniques designed to help a ranch horse do ranch work do not apply to a recreational equestrian. Flip that. Horse training and riding techniques designed to teach a competitive full-time sport horse rider or wannabe competitive full-time sport horse rider how to do that thing do not apply to someone who works a 9 to 5, sees their horse before and after work and on the weekends. It does not apply to them. The techniques to train those horses, support those horses, and work with those people are unique. They are specific. They are real. They are accurate. They are pointed. And there is a huge lack of them out there for the recreational owner. Also, I also think a horse should be so lucky to be in those homes because that horse is going to be cherished and cared for, hopefully, by their responsible owners who devote everything they've got to their horse. But I also think that is one of the hardest jobs for a horse to have. Why? Because they're getting half the hours put in that their ranch horse and sport horse counterparts get, because those riders are able to devote all day to a problem, and most horse owners can't quit their job to fix a problem or quit their job to improve their tempi changes. Like they just can't do it. And so you've got to have techniques which are more time efficient. And that's where we bring science in, because science economizes on the training and gets a result in less time, better. You've got to have training techniques which leave the emotional bond between the horse and the person intact. Otherwise, what does the person have the horse for? They're a companion animal. And if you're violating that companion animal's trust on a regular basis, the whole purpose of the endeavor goes out the window.
Yeah.
And recreational equestrians spend their entire life in that conflicted zone of, I love my horse, but why am I spurring them? Why am I pulling on them? Why am I hitting on them? Like, why is this what I am told is the right thing to do for them? And that causes them huge anxiety. And then come along confidence courses for horse riders, hypnosis course for horse riders about their anxiety and their confidence rather than changing the tools that got them there in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'm really clear about who I'm speaking to. And every time I put something out in the world, I speak to that person and to nobody else.
And to me, like, and I've got this largely from working with Shannon and following your content, as somebody who's a recreational horse owner, my horse lives 30 minutes away from me, and I never thought that this was going to be my first horse. My first horse is a mini abused, half blind, like was untouchable 5 months ago. Sweet little thing. But when we start with the like intention of how do we build trust, because I have no intention of riding this horse. I mean, she comes up to my knee. Like, I have no intention of like showing her, like she doesn't have one eye. I have no intention other than just building a trusting, loving relationship with this horse who's never been able to trust another human before. And to me, that is so much more rewarding than like, and I have, ridden beautiful horses across the desert, and I have really special relationships with my horse trainers' horses in Nevada. But like, there's something about recognizing the long-term relationship that you're building. And when you take the performance aspect out of it, and we need to get this done by X amount of time, and you start sinking into a long-term relationship, your decisions are so different, right? And so I came into this little pony's life in September, and just this last week, we were able to put a halter on her. And like, it was fully consensual. She volunteered to put her head down. She waited for me to latch the little thing on the side. And then I led her around the pen for 3 minutes, and it was like no drama. And I've seen all these crazy videos online of like, the first time a horse gets haltered and you have to like do all these insane techniques with them. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It can just be like this. But it took me from September to right now, we're speaking in February. And to me, like, the timeline didn't matter. And like, just to sort of take it back into the business world a little bit, I kind of don't care about the timeline, because for me, like, I want to be in long-term relationships with people. I want to be in a long-term relationship with my community. I want to be in a long-term relationship with my business. And so I'm not going to look for those fast injections where I need to insert pain into the equation to make somebody buy my product, or I'm going to push somebody into their sympathetic fight or flight state so that they feel like, oh my gosh, I have to get this, otherwise it's going to go away, right? Like, can we just put trust at the forefront of every relationship that we create, whether it's horse or human, potential client, business, and have that be the thing that leads and that you listen to along the way,
1000%. You're so right. And how lucky we are to have the luxury of time with our horses, because no hate to the trainers who come from the worlds where they didn't have time, because a ranch horse, there is no time to take the time to introduce you to those things. There's not the manpower, there's not the money, there's not the resources to facilitate that. And if those horses do get that, they get it over year in, year out, getting seasoned. Maybe the start was a bit rough, but usually the end is pretty bloody good for a lot of those ranch horses. And same too with a lot of sport horses, though sometimes, and I might be wrong about this for a lot of people, but sometimes that's flipped on its side with the sport horses. The start is really, really good, but then the end is kind of a bit questionable, but we do have the luxury of time. And I always say this at clinics or in lessons, that we're going to work with this horse and this issue and this subject and this technique with this horse today as if I've got 20 years to find the result. Doesn't matter that this is the first and only day that I'm going to see this horse in their life. I'm going to apply this technique as if I was going to enjoy 20 years with this horse, because that is how my client is going to work with this horse.
Yeah.
So it behooves me to introduce it in the same fashion, because you see that a lot in the horse world. The horses can do it with the trainer and the instructor can't do it with the owner. Problem, red flag, something's missing. There's a big puzzle piece missing if the owner's not getting along with it. And at clinics, people are throwing horses at me. Oh, can you do it? Can you ride them through it? And I say, this is not an audition. I don't need to prove myself to nobody. Thank you so much. So if you're wanting me to ride your horse or to do it with you to prove my skill set, then that is absolutely an intention I am not going to participate in. But if you're really, really struggling and you're a visual learner and you need to get some perspective to see what this might look like for you, yeah, I'll demo for you. But then it doesn't matter if I can do it with your horse. It matters if you can do it. And if you can't do it with your horse, then what are we doing practicing it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So again, that comes back to setting kind but gentle boundaries, saying no to things that participate in chaos and confusion and calamity. I'm just going to say wholesale no to all of that.
Yeah.
I like an easy life. I want to have a peaceful life. I don't need to be competitive with people. The whole thing exhausts me. And I don't feel the need to prove myself to anyone either. I spent my last career, I spent with huge inferiority complex, what's the one? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I had that in my last career every day. And I left it in the last career and I've rejected it for this one.
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
I think I want to, and this is a bit of an unformed thought, so we're going to work it out in real time here. Is I appreciate what you shared about not giving discounts to certain groups.
Communities.
Yeah.
I tried. I really tried. But they were exploited. It was exploited.
Yeah. Because I've been grappling with this myself, and I've been talking it through with my team. We're luckily in a place in our business where we can offer sliding scale. So, and again, this is a part of my business that I was able to build up to. So like now that I feel like we are abundant and, there's plenty of people who are willing to pay at the full price, I'm able to sort of let that trickle down into being able to give discounts. But I've made a very, very intentional move to not offer it to communities based on the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, any number of factors. I also don't ask folks to justify, or I don't verify if they need to ask for a scholarship or pay on the lower end of the sliding scale. And as a person of color myself, I actually find it a bit offensive, and I might be in the minority by saying this. I find it a bit offensive to think that just because I was born in an Asian body, I was born, as the daughter of immigrants, that I somehow can't, again, working this sort of
can't pay for it. No, I get it. Can't pay for it. So when I offered these discounts, they were if you want them. And there were plenty of people who could have applied for them and didn't, and just went, no, I can afford the whole price, so I will.
Yeah.
What I wasn't doing was screening people at the ticket purchase and say, what's the color of your skin? Oh, bingo, that's 20% off. No, I wasn't doing that. It was for people who needed it and wanted it, because I'm aware that if you are in a minority, and as a queer person, I know what that's like too. If I'm an openly queer person in the equestrian industry, boom, whole percentage of the industry that won't take me seriously, will never pay money in my business, will never participate in my work for that point alone. It's a conservative industry. because horses are in rural environments, and rural environments statistically are conservative environments. So I'm aware that I have to sometimes work twice as hard to get half as far as other people who have positions of privilege over me. And that is the same storyline true for people of BIPOC people, people of color, single mothers, etc. Even other professionals. I was giving discounts to other professionals who were practicing modern science-based horsemanship in rural conservative communities. I was like, I want you at the clinic. I'm going to co-sponsor you to be there because we should support each other. I wish I could continue to offer that. And most of the people who took advantage of that honored it beautifully and loved it. I felt really good about it. But I got no problems from the people who paid full price tickets. They didn't give me a lick of problems at the clinic, but I had a couple of incidents with people who behaved in a very unusual and entitled, surprising, potentially damaging manner that came out of left field. And they were the folks that got those discounts. And it became clear in the correspondence that they somehow felt entitled to special treatment because of their disadvantage. And I'm like, no. On the day, everyone gets treated the same. For example, if you show up late, it is not my job to stop the clinic to go invite you out of your car to come and join the clinic because you're late. And just because you got a discounted ticket doesn't then mean that I'm supposed to hold your hand throughout the clinic.
Right.
And this was the issues that we were having. And so I had to stop participating in that because people people took the gesture in a different direction than I anticipated it.
Yeah.
So I had to set that as a boundary reluctantly.
Yeah. And I've not had those experiences because I've not offered discounts specifically to, certain communities, just
Disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, disadvantaged communities. But I feel like what we need to do is create opportunities of access and again, not access that puts your business at a detriment. Like maybe build up your business to a point where you can offer a limited number of seats to folks. But I also have worked with, people who have had disadvantages, not because of some sort of demographic, but because of certain traumas that they've experienced in their life, and I don't want to sort of not allow for that nuance in terms of who can take advantage of discounted options. And so I've created this, and it's a total experiment at this point. I've just put it out there. And I'm really like, that's the fun thing about running a business is I look at it as like an experiment of like, ooh, what happens when I change this aspect of the formula, and I am genuinely curious about how this works out. But to me, it's about if you have, and I'm also really clear about the kinds of folks that I work with in terms of businesses. I'm not for everybody, but if you have a spiritual practice, if you have a business, you are seeing that emotions are coming up in your business that have also come up in other aspects of your life, and you want to help sort of integrate them and have a safe space to do that. I don't think that special treatment should be given to disadvantaged communities just because of certain demographics. I think that access is so much deeper than that. And I don't know, there may be people who unfollow me after listening to this episode just because I'm a little bit of a anomaly in that, like, I think about providing opportunities, and I also think that there's medicine in stretching for that investment, sort of like you
Yes.
were talking about earlier, of like the no-shows show up for the free connection calls versus the paid sessions, people have
Yes.
invested. And so giving
Yes.
them a space where they're investing in themselves, in their business, in their horses, I think is a really important part of that formula. So yeah,
Yes. 1000%. And it's so hard to quantify what constitutes a disadvantaged person because there's many different types of disenfranchisement and disconnection in society. There's political disenfranchisement. There are still communities in many countries in the world, even developed countries, that are not given the same rights as everybody else and protections under the law. Women, for example, queer community, for example, BIPOC community. So this touches on hot button topics. So there's, political disenfranchisement. There's emotional disenfranchisement, people who have personality disorders, people who have not had access to stable parenting or quality education. So there's many different types of disenfranchisement. But when I come to try to offer discounts to persons based on disenfranchisement, I speak to them purely at a shallow financial level because we cannot deny that the equestrian community is one of privilege and it is so inaccessible financially.
yeah,
Even doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter where you come from. If you haven't got the money, you ain't doing it. And funnily enough, isn't it funny? What faces usually populate that privileged position in the equestrian community? What do these
sure,
people look like demographically?
sure,
I don't need to say it because it would be gauche to say it, but we all see the writing on the wall. We all see the writing on the wall. So I speak to them purely at a financial level because I've been there. I used to go, well, when I was a dancer, wanted access to horses and I had no money. When I say no money, I mean nothing, nothing, nothing in the bank. But I had something going on with horses, a spark, a gift, a talent, a passion, whatever. How do I get access to this creature? What do I have to do? How many stalls do I have to rake? How many wheelbarrows do I have to push? What can I do? I don't have the money, but I've got time, I've got effort. I can trade those like currency instead. So for 10 years, I found myself coming to the south of Spain to the only place I could find in Europe where I could access Spanish horses in my price point, which was more or less nothing. And I'd be volunteering. And that's how I got my education was like this, because people provided financial channels, ones that didn't cost me anything that I could afford to get into. I've got my Patreon, which costs between 4 and 25 euros a month. That is something I would have signed up for
yeah,
10 years ago because
yeah,
that's what I could afford and I would have appreciated every single video that gets put out regardless what is put out. I couldn't afford a 100 euro coaching call. I couldn't afford a 400 euro clinic ticket, but I could do the Patreon. So I've got levels of access throughout my business from the low end all the way through to the high end.
yeah,
And I try to have that at all levels. But when it comes to standing in front of people at a clinic, there are people who simply can't even afford an auditor ticket. There are people who have horses, want to benefit from the experience, but simply financially can't do it. And I get it. And maybe financially they can't do it because not of their fault, not because anything they did wrong, but because of the situation that they were born into.
yeah,
And I believe that they deserve support on some level if it's able to be afforded to them. Now I know that I need better structures in place in order to facilitate that situation because
yeah,
I went into it slightly naively and as a pure experiment.
yeah,
It was an experiment and
yeah,
so it didn't work.
yeah,
So I need to have it structured better and or I would need a sponsor to provide scholarships to clinics so that everybody's winning,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Mm.
And like what you're talking about is something that I talk about with my community in terms of building an ecosystem of offerings. And
Hmm.
that
Hmm. I
takes
love that.
time, right?
Yes,
Like
it does.
this podcast is going to go out for free. And so there's
Right.
information that people can consume for free. You know, you've just outlined several different tiers that people can have access to. And at the higher level points, they have a different level of access to you, right? They're not
Right.
entitled to that access. And
Mm.
it's something that I think about in terms of how I price my things out and how much effort I need to put into the offering. So, for example, my one-on-ones are never discounted.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really, really hard boundary for me because it is, I'm showing up, I'm providing individual attention, individual feedback for a person, and that I cannot discount. But when it comes to like my group programs, where it is honestly not that much more work to have one more person sitting in group, and in fact, they might be contributing and adding to the community, like I'm very happy to give that discount. And so, like, as people start thinking about sort of the pricing structures and the ethics around pricing, these are all things to consider.
Mm.
And also there's no right or wrong answer, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
don't look at a business who does offer discounts for BIPOC and think, oh, like, why would they do that? And, that doesn't seem to make any sense. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense for me in my experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm allowed to make those decisions just as long, or just as other people are allowed to make decisions about their own businesses, you know.
Absolutely.
And to me, it always goes back to like nervous system regulation when it comes to this is,
Mm.
can you make these offerings, can you create this ecosystem from a place of regulation and safety rather than
Yep.
doing it out of a sense of scarcity or doing it out of a sense
Mm-hmm.
of like, well, fuck this, you know?
Yeah.
It needs to come from a space of like, these are my boundaries. This is my yes and my no. I'm going to be as clear as I can about each one of these boundaries. And people are invited to, like in your sort of shop analogy, like they're invited to participate in the ways that they feel like they can, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an
Mm-hmm.
important part of creating that ecosystem of offerings, like you've just outlined,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Mm-hmm.
comes from a sense of regulation. That comes from a sense of this is what I would have loved when I didn't have, you know, when I had $0 in my bank account, and now that I have a sense of what kind of service somebody who has a little bit more money, what they would be expecting, this is what I can offer. And
Mm.
I come from a background where I look at my sliding scale now, and I would have, at varying different points of my life, I would have qualified for each one of those scales, and
Mm.
so I really can sort of put myself into that equation and be like, okay, so what would have felt supportive and helpful at this level? And then when I
Mm-hmm.
was making a little bit more money, what would have felt supportive and helpful at this level? And at each
Mm.
price point, what feels like, I use the term nervous sighting, what feels like a nervous sighting price point, so that I'm stretched a little bit so it feels like an investment and I'm still able to stay in regulation about it, you
Mm.
know? And so that's,
Super. The psychology of pricing is so fascinating, and I love that analogy of like an ecosystem within the business, ecosystem of pricing. It's a really curious one. Like I do holiday sales once a year. When it comes to December, I prepare a bunch of offers based on the year's work and where I think people are wanting to be but can't get to. And I say, come back to me at the end of the year. I do a 1 month sale. You can prepay your services all the way through to the next year if that's what you wanted to do. I'm getting something because I get a boost to start my year off with. I
yeah,
know where I'm standing at the beginning of the year. I know how much services I've got to implement X number of months, and you know what you're entitled to throughout the year, and you can redeem them at your leisure. And
yeah,
so that's one way I've been able to kind of balance it out for me to provide an opportunity for people while still, running a business. Also, on nervous system regulation, something that came up for me, nervous system regulation is a luxury that not every service provider has. a lot of service providers are in a state of emergency, financially, logistically, time-wise, service depravity, and so to be regulated in your decisions as a business owner requires a level of privilege. And if I think about someone in a market somewhere in a third world country, do they have the luxury to be fully regulated as they scream across the market about their fresh fish that day? No, they get on their chair and they scream about it. You come here, you get this fish, you come in and they're like a firecracker, they're popping. They're not regulated at all, but they're expressive. They're being honest, they're being authentic. I prefer to lean into that authentic place. So there's been times when I still am, but earlier days building the business when I couldn't be regulated about advertisement because I needed butts and seats because I had bills to pay and I knew my services were good. And that was not the time and the place to be totally balanced about the delivery because it wouldn't have been authentic to where I was at that time. Was that an ideal situation? It absolutely wasn't an ideal situation, but was it an authentic response to a real situation? Yeah, it was. And I'm kind of in the business of working with authentic responses anyway. And so what am I doing trying to fabricate something? But now can I tell you how much more comfortable it is to be in a more secure place and to be able to make different types of decisions? Like one of my services this year, a service which really got me through the pandemic, instead of offering it all year, I now offer it only seasonally. And instead of offering it on a month-to-month opt-in, opt-out basis, I now deliver it in 3-month semesters. And if you sign up for it, you're in for that semester start through to finish, unless an emergency. That was a big deal for me to make that choice because this was a service that got me through the pandemic and it felt like letting go of the service. I also realized I can't scale service any more than where I am. I realized that the service is effective, but it's also not creative for me. It's not fulfilling for me anymore. And I'm going to have to phase it out at some point. Part of phasing it out is starting to offer it seasonally rather than all year. That was a big decision for me and it was a big deal. And I took off my sliding scale prices. I'm like, it's now a flat rate. Doesn't matter how long you've been there. It's a flat rate, period. If you want this service, this is where I'm at with it. And I had someone asking me today about that service, wanting to do an opt-in, opt-out thing. And the Lockie of 2 years ago would have just said, oh, 100%, this is where you can pay. That's really good. I needed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I genuinely did. I didn't have the luxury to turn it down.
Yeah.
Now I can say, if you want that service, there's a structure with which you must engage with. And that's not to be totally yang about it, but it's just like that's where the service is right now because it's evolved and it is gate kept because I can't be everything for everyone anymore. I can't do all the things anymore. And yeah, maybe I'm missing out on a €50 today, but that €50 would now have potentially blocked God knows what
Right.
in the future.
Well,
That was so hard to make.
Yeah, well, I think this is such a beautiful example of actually the nervous system regulation piece. Because the Lockie of 2 years ago, the dysregulation would have been in saying no.
Yep.
Versus
Correct.
the Lockie of now, the dysregulation is in saying yes to that request.
Ah, you got it.
Right?
100%.
And so
Thank you.
this is where I think, yes, I think nervous system regulation is a privilege. I agree with you there. And nervous system regulation is a practice that evolves over time and with where you are in your sense of your own safety. And so being able to choose and make different decisions, like I'm able to offer different things now versus 2 years ago, based on where my business is now and where my sense of safety and abundance and security is now versus 2 years ago. I did offer
Mm,
sliding scale and scholarship for my one-on-ones 2 years ago. I no longer offer
mm,
that now, right?
I love it.
And
I love it.
so
And both those choices were correct at different times in your
exactly,
life. Yes.
exactly, exactly.
Yes. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'm just
Mm.
poking at the time and I just want to be respectful of your time. How are you feeling? And is there anything that you're like, ooh, we need to chew on this last little bit before we log off?
I've got endurance for the ages, so I'm the Energizer Bunny. I can go and go and go. Um, and so I'm good. I can keep going, but um, I think it would be good to talk a bit more about specifically about boundaries,
Okay.
specifically boundaries in communicating publicly.
Okay.
Because usually, for me at least, this is my experience, and let me know where you are with it. But when someone's gone through my website and read the content, and they've seen my social media, went to the website, looked through services, and went, maybe I'll book that, and then they've booked that, and when they book that, they then get an automated email that says, this is what you can expect from the service, this is what you can't expect from the service. For example, if you book a coaching call with me, you now get an email which says that it is not necessary to send me a long email describing your story prior to the call, because that used to happen for me all the time. I would
Yeah,
get
I imagine.
long
Yeah.
emails. Now, I'm someone that writes a lot and I read a lot. So it's not the length of the email that was the problem. It was the time spent in reading it. And it started happening so consistently that in order to continue reading all of those emails, I would have had to change my prices because it's no longer a 1 hour appointment. It's now a 1.5 hour appointment because of the admin associated with the appointment on a consistent basis.
Sure.
So either the prices go up for everybody or the appointments become more scarce, or I keep the prices where they are because of accessibility and because you don't want to grow too fast. And now you get an automated email that says, if you have a short question about the call, not a problem, but long discussions about storyline and training history and about your horses, that is covered in the service you have just booked. So please save it for the service.
Sure.
That's a new thing as of 3 months ago. And I had to set that as a boundary because my life was becoming chaos managing these appointments. And if I'm getting 10 essay length emails a day where I'm having to then actually remember the storyline, I'm like Dumbledore, you got to take the memories out and put them somewhere because there's only so much you can hold. I have client notes. Every time I'm in a consultation, I take copious notes and I keep those notes forever. I will always be able to remember that way. So that's one way I've found I've been able to set boundaries and control the growth of prices and accessibility to my business is actually by teaching clients how I like to be engaged with. And so when someone comes onto my social media and writes a hostile comment, I stop and I breathe and I make sure I'm not making an adrenalized decision about what I write next, because that's not good for anyone. And that's like a drug. And if you do that too often, you're doing exactly what you really shouldn't be doing and what they want you to do. So I stop
Yeah.
and I breathe and I'll say something along the lines of, hello, call them by name, and I'll be polite. Thank you for your comment and sharing your views. There seems to be some confusion about what you are allowed to and not allowed to do on my platforms. Here is what you are allowed to do. You are allowed to disagree, welcome it. You are allowed to dislike it kindly, but dislike it. You are allowed to be confused and to ask about that confusion. But this is what is not tolerated here: hostility, brutality, abusive language, emotionally abusive, narcissistic language. It's just not allowed here, not because it offends me. I don't care. That's your stuff. I don't hold space for it because there are other people here watching who are trying to work up the courage to speak and have a voice and have a seat at the table. And your hostile commentary is beating them down from doing it and taking up that space. So I am rescinding your perceived entitlement to take up hostile space on my platform. If you want to go do it somewhere else, fine by me. If you want to make your own platform where you spew into the world hostile, condescending, patronizing rhetoric, go ahead and create that platform and take them all with you and collect them in one place. But we're not doing it here. I might have a few thousand followers at the moment, but I was writing exactly the same type of stuff when I had 431 people on my Facebook page liked, and only my mother was commenting. I was writing exactly the same stuff, And I've grown this hand over fist with thoughtfulness, with care, with attention, and with energy. And this is a space I have created. It's the same reason, like if someone's in my house at my dinner table and they start speaking about someone else in an abusive manner, I will invite them to change the conversation or invite them to leave my house. Not in my house.
Yeah.
And people think that because it's online, it doesn't count. It's not real. It's virtual. At a neurological and scientific level, that's bullshit, because the brain cannot distinguish the difference between a visualized felt experience and a lived experience.
Yeah.
Your commentary online carries exactly the same brevity and weight as it does in person. There are also a lot of people who feel disenfranchised and disconnected and incongruent with themselves. And so they're not aware of the brutality and hostility in their writing, because in their local environment, they rely upon fawn responses and body language to make up for their incongruence. And when it comes out in a written form, they don't know how to write congruently. And if that is the case, I'll always give them an opportunity to examine what they've written and say, I'm responding to you in this manner because you wrote copy paste this. Mm-hmm. Are you aware that that created an environment and a connection with me and with others that was hazardous emotionally for me and for others, and advertised yourself as a brute? Are you aware of it? If you're not aware of it, well, then this is your opportunity to become aware of it and to make a different choice with the next thing you write. If you do the same thing, you're out. I used to have a 3 strikes rule.
That's generous.
3 strikes and you're off the page. I blocked someone today because they said I looked like Justin Trudeau, and that they used foul language about the way I looked in a comment on my page. And I thought, hang on a minute, you don't get to do that. You're not entitled to it. You're out. Get out. And that's not censorship.
No.
Because you can go to your own page and write whatever the hell you want. Yeah. But you don't get to do that on mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot agree with you more emphatically. And, this happened to me, this seems to come up every couple of months for me, because I talk about capitalism and being, untangling toxicity from capitalism. And yet here I am, a business that's making money. And so people tend to look at that as like a black and white sort of a situation and want to call me out on that kind of stuff. And the analogy that I've used a lot with my community is like, yes, I am authentic. Yes, I'm vulnerable. Yes, I share tender things with you here. But this is a business storefront, essentially. And you wouldn't go into someone's lovingly curated storefront on, on the main street and start bashing the pottery and start, pulling the rugs off of the displays. Like, you would go in there, and if you don't like it, you would walk out. And you're welcome to walk out. You're even welcome to tell me something as you walk out. I have the
Mm-hmm.
sovereignty to choose to listen to that or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think three strikes is generous. My community, I think I'm going to use a horse analogy here, because when you hold space in the way that you just described, of compassion and understanding and empathy, and here's a strong boundary, this is what is not allowed here.
Mm.
Winnie, who's my little mini horse, she lives in a herd with two other full-sized horses. And at the moment they're in, because it's winter time, they're in a very like small enclosed pen, and I can just feel the dynamics of the herd like vibrating at a different level. And Bullet, who's kind of the old grumpy guy in the herd, has started sort of like chasing Winnie around and like nipping
Mm.
at her. And
Mm.
I think he's not like that in the summertime when they get to be out on pasture. But what I've started noticing is when I go in there and I hang out with Winnie, and I am able to shoo Bullet away, just giving her nervous system like a reprieve, right?
Mm.
It builds more trust between she and
Mm.
I. And
Mm.
what I've started noticing is she has actually started standing, and sometimes I'll just go in there and like hang out. Like, we don't do anything, we just hang out. And she has started giving me her blind eye.
Mm.
So she will have her seeing eye on the outside to scan. And my interpretation of that is, I trust you enough to let me know if there's something coming at us from our backside,
Mm.
right? And that's what holding a boundary has done for my
Mm.
relationship with Winnie. And
Mm.
if we put that into the context of your community, I think about
Mm.
that as, you know, that is what your community comes to you for,
Mm.
is a space holding that feels protective, a space holding that says, that's disrespectful, that's not okay, that's not allowed. I'm not beating Bullet to like get him away. I'm just like making myself big and saying, no, that's not okay. And when he gets to have, an hour where you're not chasing her around, and that has shifted that dynamic between Winnie and I, you know.
Mm.
And I think that that's how you are also, in a relational sense, building trust with your community, and that's a really valuable part of what it is that you do in your unpaid
Trying
work.
to, it is unpaid work, and I'm trying to do that. If I can't do that, then I don't have a platform where there's commentary available. If I can't create that space, then the space doesn't exist. So I had to close down the comment section of my YouTube channel on all of the videos. I've got like 300 videos on YouTube, but only like 26 are public. Um, and because the YouTube comment section in particular, when I went through it, I was like, this like the catch drain of human society? Like, why is this the dregs of humanity? The worst, darkest, most dirty, most evil urgings of humanity found a held space in the YouTube comment section. That and spam comments, and I was like, no, Lachlan, no, Lachlan, don't censor, don't censor, don't censor, because you've got to create trust through not creating censorship, right? Because it comes across as if maybe you don't believe in what you're putting out there, so you don't want people to not like it or something like this. But it wasn't about that. The reason why I shut down my YouTube comments is because 90% of the comments were beautiful, really supportive, from clients and people I didn't know, who were just like, we love it, great. few people asking questions. I always answered the questions. Hello, I'm confused about X. Can you explain? I always explained, always explained. But then there was that 1% of comments which were just vile, just vile. And people I didn't know took time out of their day to come up to bat for me and defend me in the comment section with multiple exchanges in the comment section. And I went, nope, not on my watch. If someone else that I don't know feels the need to defend me in a comment section, then that place is an unhealthy, toxic environment already, and it needs to be shut down. So I just shut it down. I just shut it down. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not trying to be a YouTuber. I have a horse from the #1 equestrian YouTuber, and so his community does feel entitled to have free access to updates about him because that's what they're used to. So that's why I have a YouTube channel now, because I'm just trying to make sure people hear about him, and then I have a small handful of sample videos of my work, which may or may not funnel people into working with me. And that's what I use it for. I'm not trying to be a YouTuber. My YouTube's monetized, but there's nothing in it really for me at this height, at this stage. But it is a lot of work. So I manage Instagram, I manage Facebook, but I had to shut down YouTube. I've always found Instagram to be much, much healthier commentary with the community. I found that people on Instagram come with a better attitude. Facebook, something about the Facebook algorithms encourages something in people which is deeply concerning to me at times. And maintaining a safe platform for others requires hypervigilance, to put it in horse training terms. I mean, it's every day at the control panel, going through everything and making sure that everyone's safe and behaving themselves. You know, because some people just can't. Some people can't just behave themselves in someone else's life.
And I mean, it's so interesting that you have the data points of those 3 platforms. Like, I don't have a Facebook page, though I do follow you on Facebook. And my, for lack of a better word, my storefront has always been Instagram. And I've only recently put up a YouTube channel, and it's like there's just not that much traction on YouTube. And I wonder if it's a matter of, like, YouTube feels a bit like an audience, versus on Instagram, I call it a community because that's what it really feels like. There's like a really lovely interchange. And every once in a while I do get those like hostile comments like you're talking about. And, you know, modeling for people the boundaries that they would like to uphold themselves, I think, is a part of the medicine of the work that we do, you know, because once I do hold a boundary, I always have a drop off of folks, and folks who like want to announce themselves as they leave. I don't know why people insist on doing that, but the vast majority of private DMs that I get after I hold a boundary is thank you so much for doing that.
Yes, 1000%.
You know, and so for me, I hold the boundary because those people who left, like, and I don't really care about numbers anymore, like the 30 people who left, let's say, participate in my community in the ways that I want to cultivate the community. But the people who DM me afterwards are interested in being a part of the community, potentially purchasing one of my courses or one of my programs. And so to me, I value them differently because I do see my work as being a bit of a, I don't know, like we're on the forefront of doing business differently. And so if we are going to build up that revolution of folks who acknowledge that business can be slimy and icky and disgusting and want to do something differently about it, you know, even if nobody purchases something from me, I still think that it's valuable to have them in that community. And so to me, it's about that community protection And that's where
Mm-hmm.
my mama bear goes up and says, no, you aren't allowed to speak to people in this way, even me. And
Mm.
this is, yes, it's a public page, but that does not mean that you are entitled to, you know, spew whatever hostility you feel like spewing on this page.
Right. Right.
And I used to leave those comments up actually, and now I've started taking them down because I started thinking about it and it was like, if somebody came into my store and like smashed a vase on the floor, wouldn't I clean that up? And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm cleaning it up now.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's also part of a little bit of the privilege of being a niche service provider, because the smaller your niche is, the more specific you're allowed to be, and also potentially the more controversial you can be with those people. But the bigger your audience, the more broad the scope of your audience, and the bigger your demographic, the less tolerance there will be for controversy. I know this when I met with Matt Hanatske, the YouTube personality. He was behind the scenes when he and I discussed, it was very, very important to him, the storyline that was put out in the public, because his livelihood depended upon this enormous following that he's got, et cetera, et cetera. And so he was very, very specific that there were certain things that can be said and there are certain things that can't be said, certain attitudes that can be expressed and certain that are to be kept private. I personally couldn't handle that sort of responsibility, to kind of present yourself like a Barbie doll to be everything for everyone. It's sort of the difference between the McDonald's Big Mac and Happy Meal and the little mom and pop restaurant down the road, independent, experimenting with grass-fed beef and homemade sauces, and they've only got a few tables. And that business is very different from the McDonald's, though they're both making burgers.
Yeah.
Someone walks into a McDonald's, they know that they are entitled to buy a Big Mac. But if that person walked into the independent restaurant down the road, they are not entitled to ask for a Big Mac. And that's not your place to do it. This is what we do here. So you either want that or go to McDonald's. This is how I see my business. I'm not a McDonald's. You're not entitled to have a say in what it looks like, because that's my job to create it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I've also been grappling with that because I had a large community growth last year, big jump. And I went, hang on a minute. I'm going to be sitting in a slightly different point where I do need to find better ways to communicate to the community on controversial subjects. I need to find a more inclusive way to discuss difficult subjects without alienating absolutely everybody that isn't exactly like me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of my very personal growth, and I wish I was better at it, still on that growth. But I do feel like I have made some progress there. I am less likely to post now more frequently as I did a year ago. A year ago, I would have a thought, working a horse somewhere, I'd have a thought about something and I'd just go boom, a boom, blast, 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 and I'd post about it. Now I really think about it. I write a couple of drafts and then I edit, and then I make sure that I've really considered the point of view that I'm putting out there that is safe. Because if I'm going to tell other people with hostile commentary to leave, I need to make sure I'm not putting it out there first,
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
this
that's
is,
been a
yeah, and
learning
this
curve
is
for
why I
me.
think business is a spiritual practice. It's one of the things that I say all the time.
Oof.
And
Yes.
it, at every year there's different challenges. Every year there's
Mm,
different stuff that comes up. Every year there's a different level of nervous system regulation.
mm.
Every year there's an examining of your own ethics and your values. And then the world is
Ah,
changing. And so then you have to like put your ethics and values up against the world's changing ethics and values and be like, do those still align? And
that's so
so,
great.
yeah. And so I really
So where are
do.
you? So I hate to interrupt you, but I
No,
have
go
to
ahead.
ask you.
Yeah.
You say every year there's something to review in the business as a spiritual practice, and for me, this year has been about surrendering myself to position where I'm public
Mm.
and letting go of some of that control and showing me more than I would. I always put the work first because I think people want the work, they don't want me.
Mm.
And I'm starting to learn people also want me. They don't just want what I can do for them.
Yeah.
And that's part of my recovery from body extractivism. It wasn't about me, it was what I could do for you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I want to be in service, but I'm also realizing that I've got to come first and then the service comes second, and that's also about how I present to people. So
Yeah.
that's my thing for this year that I'm experimenting with. What's yours?
Mm. I love your word surrender. It's a very special word to me. Um, and I just want to like touch in this before I talk about what my work is this year. But my background comes from being an acupuncturist, and the core tenet of that medicine is Taoist medicine. And
Mm,
Taoism is about going back to a version of yourself. We come into this world as this like as pure of a being as we can be, and then we have conditions, we have survival tactics that get layered on, and so a lot of the work of spirituality is subtractive, in my opinion. It's about unlayering all these conditions and these survival strategies, right? And so
yes.
in my business coaching course, I actually take each individual through a meditation, and we land on a word that is kind of your compass for your life. And my word is surrender.
Ah,
And the flip side of that is control for me. I've had a lot of
mm-hmm,
experiences in my life where I've needed to control so many things growing
mm,
up. And that is how I survived my family. That's how I survived school. That's how I survived
mm,
so many things. And so when I feel my body somatically going into that place of control, I know that that's an invitation for me to find surrender in some way. And so surrender is just a precious precious word to me. So I just want to like just I give you a big hug over that, just that word.
yes.
And when I was on Shannon's land when I came to this. She has this beautiful property out in Vancouver Island, and I asked her one evening if I could make a fire for myself and just sit by the fire, like by myself. And she was like, "Yeah, of course." And my intentionality with that is I was starting to feel this like push and pull from my business of like my business feels like an entity. Like it feels like something I'm in like a co-creative partnership with. And I can
Mm,
feel my business saying, I want to run. Like it's like that sensation of being on a
mm,
horse and they just want
mm,
to like race across the field, right? And
mm,
I was getting that sense from my business, and I'm sitting here like pulling back on the reins because I'm scared. Like I don't
mm,
want this business to run away from me and get too big.
mm,
Again, that like concept that you just touched on a few times of like we don't want to grow in an unsustainable rate. Like we want to grow in a way that like you're able to stay rooted and balanced. And what I landed on is I'm scared that if my business grows too fast, too soon, then I'm going to lose the connection that I have with the people in my community. And
yes.
so, can
Dang, it's such a
I,
sticky spot for so many.
right?
Oh my God,
Right?
wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, my compass this year has been expansion through connection, which has,
Mm,
in a very tangible way, shifted a lot of my offerings. So, there's a lot
mm.
of people out there who are like selling funnels. Like I don't know if you know this terminology in the
Yeah, I've
business world
heard
right
of
now.
them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so an example of a funnel is at the top of the funnel you sign up for my email newsletter and you get a meditation. And then that puts you in a certain part of the funnel where you get a little bit more of an offering, and maybe that's like a $10 offering, and you basically like funnel people down into paying for that big ticket offer. And this is what I see going out in the world, and I'm like, that feels so disconnecting. Like, how many times has somebody downloaded that meditation and like never listened to it? I'm not interested
Right.
in like giving somebody an inferior product to try to entice them to come in and like buy my big ticket offering, right? And so I've started hosting after that night in the woods where I got to sit by a fire. I started offering monthly community calls, completely free. Anybody can come in, ask questions about their business. They get a taste of what it feels like to be coached by me. There's a reciprocity piece, and this is the consent to this when they sign up for it is they're recorded, they're released as podcast episodes. And so I assume there's a lot of people who struggle with similar questions. And so if I can answer this one person's question and coach that person through that process, then somebody else is also going to benefit from it. So then the whole community benefits, right? And so it's this
I love
piece
that.
around we can expand, but I think that what we see so much of out there is like scaling and expanding and making your audience as big as possible, but then you lose that very critical and crucial,
Mm.
beautiful piece, which is what got you started in this business in the first place, which is connection. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
For some people,
Mm,
for some people, I've started to learn that not every service provider actually got into it because of connection.
mm,
Some people are into it because they didn't know what else to do, or I don't know. There are many, many service providers who actually don't like their job and don't actually like the connection, and they really would like to be left alone by their clients, and they see their clients as a liability. They're a defensive practitioner rather than a creative practitioner, and there are a lot of people that want to scale, want to build, want to funnel because they really just don't want to talk to anyone and they really don't want to serve anyone.
yeah,
They just want to serve like two people a year who are paying all the bills and
yeah.
that's it.
So those are
And
not my
that doesn't,
people.
no, they're not my people either. And it's not how I like to run business. I do like to know people. Like I can sit here and tell you so much about my clients and their horses off the top of my head, even without looking at my notes. I
Yeah.
know their names, I know their ages, I know their tendencies, I know what they're like. I still work with my first client ever. We're
Mm,
still together. We had a lesson this morning. I woke up this morning, made coffee, and taught a lesson on my laptop in my kitchen for my
yeah.
first client ever. We still work together.
Yeah.
And again, it's those long-term bonds and it's that community and finding growth through that. I absolutely adore that. That's
Yeah.
such a nice way to look at it. But at the same time, you can take advantage of some scaling and some funneling just to create good places for people to go because it works for some people sometimes.
Yeah.
I remember when I used to be heavily involved in like the art world and the art scene, I used to go to art galleries a lot. I've been to every gallery in Berlin multiple times, and I that's what I used to do with my spare time
Mm,
in my very, very early 20s. And I read about it in a book because I went to this wonderful museum and it was my favorite museum I'd ever been to. I'm like, what makes this museum so good? And I read about the museum designer and he said that good museums don't have one single line with arrows on the floor where you follow this arrow to that arrow to that arrow and you go from painting, painting, painting in the order we have curated you to look at them,
right.
right? Which is like a funnel, right? You go from here through to here and everyone has that linear projection. He said the best galleries make the people in the gallery run from that wall to that wall. And then they're like, oh my God, look at that up there. And then they run up there to look at that. And then they come back here to look at this. And then there's a little room over there that they go inside and they look at that. And it's like this, it's triggering seeking and curiosity and wonder and motivating movement and fluidity is kind of how I prefer to do things because I have a bunch of people who have never worked with me before, never paid me anything before, and they'll jump right in the deep end with a clinic ticket and sign up, and they're in
Yeah.
for like 4 figures off the
Yeah.
bat.
Yeah.
Never met them, don't know anything about them, and they're in at the top. No funnel,
Yeah.
no funnel. They barely know anything about me. I show up and they have barely any idea who I am, and they're in right at the deep end. And then you've got people that start out very suspiciously, really not believing you, really not trusting you. And maybe the distrusting client needs a funnel because they need to know that you've earned their money
Yeah.
and that they can believe that it's worth it. But not everyone's like that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that analogy. And I am just looking at the time, and I got so lost in this conversation that I have a client in 2 minutes. So,
Oh, you've got a hard out.
yeah.
Well, very good.
So in 2 minutes, can you just share with folks how they can find you?
Best place to find me is on my website, emotionalhorsemanship.com, because I will collect your email addresses and then I got you and I'm going to funnel you. No, no. But go to my website first. There's a lot of information on my website. Everything's there. You can also find me on Instagram, Emotional Horsemanship, and Facebook, Emotional Horsemanship, and YouTube, if you're into that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And if you ever want to nerd out about anything, just shoot me an email. We can have you back on the show.
I will.
I'd love
I
to
will.
continue chatting with you.
I love it. Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. You have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, you too.
Okay.